Hi students, this is a quick video that's going to show you exactly how to do a few of the very key and basic things that you need to do to set yourself up for success when designing for the laser cutter or the vinyl cutter. We learned in our lesson yesterday about vector lines, which are lines that connect points in space. They are generated mathematically. They are ultra precise, and those are the type of lines that we need to draw when we design cut paths for the laser cutter and the vinyl cutter. So with that in mind, we're going to create a new document in Adobe Illustrator. And there are a couple of things we always need to pay attention to when creating a file for the laser cutter. First of all, we want to make sure that we name our file. So I'm just going to call it line drawing 1. We also need to make sure that the units are set to inches. Sometimes when you open Illustrator, it might be set to something else. So you want to make sure inches is your unit. Also, a good habit to get into is making sure that the width and height of your file matches the size of the material that you're going to be using. So I'm just putting in an arbitrary value of 6 and 6 because I'm not actually cutting anything from this. This is just a demo. So you can put in 6 and 6 as well. The other thing you're going to check, and for you this might be closed, the advanced options, you want to make sure that when you open this up, it says color mode RGB. The other option is CMYK. This is for when you're printing stuff on a printer with toner or ink. We are not doing that. So we want to make sure that we have red, green, blue color selected. That color mode is what we're going to be using for laser cutting. All right, so we're going to hit create, and here's our canvas. So there's a lot going on this screen. But in order to set yourself up for success, one of the things that we need to set up first is to make sure that the lines that we're drawing are the correct color. The laser cutter will cut a line that it notices is red. If you draw a line and do not make that line red, the laser cutter will not cut it. That's just as simple as that. So if we want to control the color that our line is going to be, we're going to look over to the left side of the screen at this little graphic here. There is a square on the right that doesn't have anything inside it, and that is called the stroke color. Right now it's set to black. So if we click on the stroke color, we're going to get a little color window that pops up here, and we'll see RGB, red, green, blue. In order for the laser cutter to recognize a cut path, your line needs to be true red, which means we drag this slider all the way to the right to where it says 255, the highest value for red, and we leave green and blue on 0. This is true red, and this is the color that the laser cutter is going to look for in your document in order to cut a cut path. The other square in our graphic here is known as the fill color. It's the color that is going to fill in your shape when you draw it. This has all sorts of other reasons why you might want to use it, but for the laser cutter, we don't want there to be any fill color. And right now, while it looks like it's blank because it's white, white is still technically a color. So what you want to do is you want to make sure you click on the fill color here, and that'll bring that square forward and bring our little thing back up here. We are going to click this guy. This symbol universally means when you see a white square with a red line through it, that means no color at all. Notice the RGB turns off. That means that the fill of the shape is see-through. There's nothing inside of it. So now that we have set our colors to look this way, that means whatever shape or line we draw, it will have no fill, there will be nothing inside it, and it will only be a line. So let's draw some stuff. We're going to click on the pen tool, and we will do some single clicks to draw a 4-sided object. Now, before you click to do the last point, I would like for you to hover a little bit. You'll see that once your pen tool touches your first anchor point, a little 0, that little circle appears to the lower right. It's very small, easy to miss. If you do not see that circle, then you are not actually closing your loop. You're going to create another anchor point. And what a lot of people do sometimes is they click around a bunch of times at the end and end up with a bunch of extra anchor points and a whole mess of stuff going on over here. Say, how do I get to the end? Pause, and you wait. And once you see circle, you are all set. So what if this happens to you? It's not a huge deal. We can actually zoom in by clicking the magnifying glass. Zoom in, zoom in, zoom in, zoom in. So we have some extra vertices here that we may not want. So how do we get rid of those? We go up to the pen tool. Oops. Illustrator threw me for a loop there. This is the new version. No, you used to go up to the pen tool to find this, but now it's a little smarter than that. So if we notice, if we bring our pen tool back down onto our line and we hover over an anchor point tool, you'll notice that that little asterisk turns from a asterisk to a minus sign. And what that does is that will delete the anchor point if we click on it. So you have to make sure the minus sign is there. Click away, and then maybe we'll get rid of this one too. Notice that if you do not hover exactly over that anchor point, you will not see that minus sign. See the minus sign, click, and then let's get rid of this one too, and click. Great. So I am continuing to zoom in, but if we press Alt on our keyboard, you'll see our magnifying glass reverses its purpose, and we can click to zoom out. So what else can we do here? We can go back to our pen tool, and instead of deleting vertices, if we hover over the line that we've drawn, notice we get a plus sign. So if we click there, we have now just created an extra anchor point. If we want to adjust the locations of the anchor points, we can go back to our direct select tool, which is this white mouse arrow guy here, and we can click and drag our control points around, or our anchor points. So unlike in the spline game, we have the ability to go in and fine tune our lines exactly how we want them to look after we've drawn them. But what if we wanted curved lines? We could go in and we can click and drag instead, just like in the spline game. And by clicking and dragging, we end up by making handles like this. Click and drag, click and drag, click and drag, click and drag, and closing the loop, making sure that we are hovering over that first anchor point until we see the circle, and then closing the loop. So we can do the same thing that we did before. We can remove an anchor point if we want by hovering and looking for that minus sign to show up, or we can make sure that we have the plus showing and then click and drag, creating another handle. Going back to that arrow again. Whoa. So notice you can change the lengths of the handles independently of one another, and you can really get creative with shapes that you make. What if I want this to be a corner? And what if I want this to be round? Well, I can go back to the pen tool, and I can go to this guy here, the anchor point tool. And what that allows me to do is it allows me to convert between the types of anchor points. So if I use it here, it will turn from a curved anchor point to a corner. Corners, 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 corners. Likewise, in our other shape, if we click and drag on a corner, we will then get a curved handle. So we can put curves on our shape. Just like that. If we go back to the main arrow tool, you'll notice that it selects the entire shape. By clicking and dragging, we are then able to move our shape around the canvas. Just same as over here. Move it around the canvas. I'm going to zoom out a little bit more. Pressing Alt. You see the shapes I drew were really small. So keeping in mind, this is a 6 by 6 inch piece of material that I'm designing on. So I've just drawn some very tiny shapes. Now, technically I could cut these really tiny shapes, and that's totally fine. But the last thing that you want to do before you submit a file for cutting is to make sure that you have your shapes selected. So you can click and drag across them, and then you get that little blue box. Then we click over to the Properties tab. You'll see over here, you also have the ability to set your fill color, which is transparent like we wanted, and the true red like we wanted. But you can always come over here and adjust it if you ever needed to. The other thing you need to do is you need to make the line super skinny. And I always recommend you guys do this at the end, because when the line is really skinny, it's kind of hard to see it when you're actually working with it. So we are going to switch it to 0.001 and hit enter. And you'll see that once we click away, that our lines are still there, but they're really, really kind of faint, and they're really, really, really small. So the red color and the very thin line weight are the two things that the laser cutter is going to recognize when we send this design off to cut. All right. So that is it for this lesson. You guys should be able at this point to take the remaining time to practice drawing some shapes and practicing working with the pen tool and the anchor point tool to adjust the shapes of your lines, and using curves and straight corners while drawing your lines.